Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 338 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. Another week and the bees are out flying. It's a delight to see. I'm still not carrying out any inspections though. It's way too early. I am, however, thinking about queen rearing and the process of cell production using the Cloake Board method. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. Before we get into today's beekeeping conversation, and in the absence of anyone else supporting my podcast with an advert or two, here's my little self-promotion again. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,600 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible. No waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2025 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey, and you never know, there may be something there that will help you improve your beekeeping. Head over to Google and search for Patreon and the Norfolk Honey Company. Hi everyone, here we are back in the office. Thanks for joining me once again, and what a glorious spring day we're looking forward to. It looks like the top temperature here in Norfolk is going to hit 17 degrees Celsius. That's a ridiculous 62 degrees Fahrenheit, and I just know our bees are going to be very busy today, and in fact all of the weekend. So much so, in fact, yesterday I actually put my bee suit in the truck as we headed out to take a look at what was happening in the apiaries. Once at the apiaries, there seemed little reason really to interfere with them, as I could pretty much see everything that I needed to by standing at the hive looking at the entrances of each colony. Some were very busy, others not so much. One was actually dead. We closed this one down and put it on the back of the truck. Another was very quiet, with no flying bees, so I popped off the roof and feeder to be met by a reasonably large cluster of bees, all quietly sitting and waiting for the weather to improve a little bit more before they ventured out, obviously preferring it to be nice and warm before they even start flying, it seems. All of the colonies that were flying had workers returning with pollen, a comforting sign, and for most colonies this would indicate that they have a laying queen. Remember, this isn't always the case, and of course there is always the spectre of a drone-laying queen waiting to disappoint us when we carry out that first inspection, but those are few and far between. Mostly, pollen being brought back to the hive is a strong indication that all is well and they have a normal laying queen. Now is a good time to check entrances. Not opening the hive, you understand, just looking at the entrances, particularly those with mouse guards on them. Over the winter period, bees will die, and sometimes they can block the entrance to a hive. So if you don't see any flying bees, just have a quick look at the entrance inside the hive and use a twig or something similar to make sure that the entrance isn't blocked with dead bees. As I mentioned, we had a dead colony again this week. It was a tiny cluster, and that recent frosty weather was the end for them. I don't think we'll lose any more now. I'm crossing my fingers here. The rest all look strong and were flying well, indicating that they have enough bees to look after the developing brood, while a chunk of that population goes out foraging. once they return from foraging and settle down in the brood nest area, I would think they will have enough bees to easily manage those overnight brood nest temperatures. That is, unless, of course, we hit a very prolonged cold spell in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Remember, we are still only just heading into spring, and we have a long way to go before the more settled, warmer weather arrives, and we can breathe a sigh of relief and look forward to the summer and a potential honey crop. So, at last count, that was yesterday, we're starting the new season with exactly 44 colonies. We lost, if I'm honest, too many nukes over winter, a mixture of smaller colonies and also, I think, a result of treating later than I had wanted with the oxalic acid trickle treatments. I'm going to keep a close eye on the Varroa numbers this spring, and where we need to treat, I think that I definitely will. The plan this year is very dependent on what the medical team tell me in April. I'm hoping to be given the all clear and get back into a growth phase of beekeeping by producing a significantly larger number of nucleus colonies this year. It will reduce our honey yield, but the side effect for me is a reduction in heavy lifting and, of course, more time shooting videos and recording these podcasts. Once again, our honeypore colonies appear to be doing very well indeed. These colonies have lots of bees heading out foraging and are among the strongest that we have. I now feel the time is right to make a decision about exactly which type of Langstroth hives we should use, and I am leaning heavily towards our honeypore hives. They tick pretty much all of the boxes for me as a hive that I want to use long term, so I think all the other hives will now go and we'll stick with just the honeypore brand. Last week I spoke about using the Cloake Board method for developing queen cells, and I wanted to just finish off that discussion before moving on to the other method that I'm going to try this year. So you will remember I described setting up the Cloake Board colony to use as a cell builder colony, and we have that board that separates the queen right part of the colony in the bottom box, while we have the second brood box above it, which then becomes apparently queenless. So how do the mechanics of this work, and in particular the timing of swapping everything around to produce quality queen cells? I'm going to use the Nico queen cell system as the example method here, but we could use any one of a myriad of methods to get those queen cells produced. It really is that versatile. That said, it does need planning. I was going to say careful planning, but actually that implies more difficulty than there actually is. Provided you're prepared, have all the equipment ready, and you know your timeline, a spreadsheet is a useful thing for this, and it does make life a lot easier. The CB colony, that's my shorthand for Cloake Board, the CB colony is set up to create a massive crowd of workers in that top box. Remember, in the middle of this box we have a frame that we're going to use for our very young larvae. Either side of this frame we have mature larvae. Next, moving outwards, we have a frame of pollen on either side, and finally unsealed honey, and if needed, a frame feeder. The result of the turned around hive, as I described last week, is that all the foraging bees will end up in the top box and dramatically increase the number of bees in there. We've often had large clumps of bees on the outside of the top brood box because they just can't get in. There are so many. So let's look at what we do on the day of inserting that frame of very young larvae. In the morning of using the Nico cell cups, we make the switch around with our CB hive and place the board in front of the hive leading up to the top brood box. Remember, the Cloake Board is inserted, so the colony is effectively split in two, the top box being now queenless. By mid-afternoon, so many bees will have returned to that top box, it really will look overloaded, and have bees hanging on the outside of that top box entrance, almost in a kind of beard situation. You should also hear that familiar queenless roar that is associated with colonies that are genuinely in a state of queenlessness, so do listen closely for that. At this time, mid-afternoon, open up the top box and carefully remove that middle frame. In this example, it will have the Nico holders in place to which we fix the cell cups with the very young larvae inside. Prior to that, shake off the bees that are clinging to this frame, and believe me, there will be hundreds hanging on it, and take it away to your Nico queen donor colony, the one that you're using to produce the queen cells, and add the cell cups to it. What we're effectively doing is tricking the bees into producing initially emergency queen cells. Young nurse bees will rapidly feed the young larvae with royal jelly, and we can produce a large number of queen cells in this top brood box. A single frame will easily produce 20 quality queen cells, and more if you wanted to, but for me 20 queen cells at one time is a good number, and it ensures a huge amount of royal jelly is supplied to each cell cup. Once our cell cup frame has been fitted with young larvae from the Nico system, we carefully place it into the middle of our top brood box again and replace the feeder and roof. Now here's the next part of the trickery. If we left the cloak board in place, these emergency queen cells might not be as well looked after as a swarm or supersedure queen cell might be. So, to artificially create that supersedure environment, we remove the cloak board about 24 to 36 hours later. At this point, the rear entrance is blocked up so that all the flying bees have to use the top entrance, and the nurse bees, detecting the developing queen cells in the top box, will head up and continue to feed them royal jelly as supersedure queen cells. Over the next 8 to 10 days, our worker bees will develop these queen cells, drawing down wax from the Nico cups and forming well-provisioned, gnarly-looking queen cells. Once they've been capped, the Cloakboard colony is basically no longer required, and these queen cells can be removed and placed into queen mating nukes or queenless colonies of whatever size. My preference is for small nucleus colonies rather than the queen mating nukes, as I've never really been terribly good at managing those smaller boxes of bees. Small nukes can be formed with just a couple of brood frames, so it doesn't use a huge amount of resources from a busy apiary. Once the queen cells are out of the CB hive, it can be dismantled and reset with a bottom entrance, or manipulated to start all over again. It's a really effective method of producing high quality queen cells, and one I recommend for anyone looking to produce a good number of new queens this season. Of course, some of you will remember I have equipment for another method of queen rearing called the John Harding method of queen rearing. You'll also remember, no doubt, that I failed pretty miserably with it in our first year of trying. Not being one to give up on something because of my own incompetence, I'm going to give it a try again this year. There are pros and cons with using this method when compared to the CB hive, and I think the jury's out for me on which works best. And that's one of the most important things here that I want to try to get over to you all. It doesn't matter what my experiences in beekeeping are, queen rearing or otherwise, in terms of methods that you use for your beekeeping. If something that I do works well for you too, then fantastic, I'm really pleased. But if it doesn't work well, or you find it tricky to use, then that doesn't make you or me a bad or incompetent beekeeper. It just means that method isn't right for you. All you have to do is to go look for another way to do the same thing, because there's bound to be something else out there for you to try. I take the same approach with my beekeeping. Give it a go. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, then make a mental note of it, learn from it before moving on to try something else. So the John Harding method needs 2 nucleus colonies. The The good news is I have those. Oh, before I continue, remember this isn't going to happen for a few weeks as yet, and that's at the earliest. We're still waiting for settled, warmer weather, and I'm sat here with cold feet, so we're not there yet. The JH method uses 2 side-by-side queen-right nukes, separated by a nuke box in between them, and with a queen excluder on either side to prevent the queen from either queen-right nuke from getting into that middle queenless box. That middle box is populated in a similar way to the CB hive, and when the time is right, the very young larvae are placed in the middle for the nurse bees to take care of. The timing is pretty much the same for all queen rearing, given that the time it takes for a queen to develop from a very young larvae is the same regardless of the method. Thus, at around day 10, these queen cells will be capped and can be placed into queen mating nukes or queenless nukes, as with the CB hive method. The issues I came up against last time was that I underestimated the growth within the queen-right nukes, and as a result they ran out of space pretty quickly and themselves swarmed. Not ideal, to say the least. This season I'm planning to have several smaller nucleus colonies in the same apiary so that I can drain off sealed frames of brood and pop those into those small nucleus colonies, keeping the overall population in the JH nukes to a less congested size, and with a little luck reduce that urge for them to swarm. With this all in mind, now's the time to start planning how many colonies I'll need for our queen rearing and where I want them to be in terms of apiary location. I suspect it will be the fishing lakes again, but we'll see. If you have any questions about queen rearing methods or anything about this podcast at all, do drop me a message using direct messaging or email. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget to check out my website www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and for my latest videos and podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks, and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.